Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this tutorial, it's a continuation of our TypeScript tutorial for beginners. So in this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and cover the concept of generics in TypeScript. So these are more advanced concepts in TypeScript. We're going to cover all that. Okay. So let's move into the VS Code, my text, my code editor, and I'm going to go ahead and just select everything and just clear all that off. So let's say that we have a function that takes in a given data type and returns returns a value of the same data type. So I'm going to have a function right here. I'm going to call this one output, okay? And it's going to take a data, and this data is going to be of type number, example. And for example, it's going to also going to go ahead and return number as well. So we're going to go ahead and say return, and then return data, and that works fine because data is again type of number. So that's all this function does, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this function and just duplicate it a couple of times. So I'm going to call this one output 2, and it's going to be of string, right? So we're going to have a type for all this. So it's going to be a string, just like this, string. Okay. So let's say I want to do this for more types. So also I want to do this for Boolean, right? So I'm going to say output 3, and then it's going to be of type Boolean. So I'm going to select that and say Boolean, just like that. Okay. So you can see this works fine, right? What if we have a thousand different types in TypeScript? Now that can become really difficult. Okay. For example, let me just demonstrate this too. So I'm going to go ahead and create my own type, and I'm going to call this type. I'm just going to go down here. I'm going to call this one type, and I'm going to call it multi array. I'm going to just call this multi array, and it's going to be my own custom type. And I'm going to have row 01, and it's going to be of type basically an array. And I'm going to copy that and paste it, and it's going to be type row 02, and it's going to be of type array, right? So I'm going to have another function just like the one we have here. I'm just going to paste this, and this is going to be 4, so 4, and then change this to be copy this, and then go here and select this, and then replace it with multi-array. So if I add my own types, if I add more types, then I have to repeat the same function over and over again. So you can see this function actually very simple, but you are writing almost 20 lines of code just to do this. So is there a way that you can just use one function to achieve the same thing? Yes, and that's where the concept of generic comes in. So let me just show how you can use generics for this. So I'm just going to go ahead, get rid of all this. I don't need all this, get rid of all this. Okay. And then I'm going to move this to the absolute stop right there. And yeah, that's what there we go. So good. So once we have this right here, so now I want to just write one single function that can accept and return data of any type. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and simply say this to just keep an arrow right, and then you say t, or you can type in type, right? And then you can go here and say that it's going to be of type, and then here you can say type. That's basically it. That's all we need to do. So now that we have this function, let's go ahead and test it out. So I'm going to say console.log, and finally pass in, let's say, I'm going to call the output function, and I'm going to go ahead and pass in, I can just say this, and then finally pass in this. So I need to pass in a type here. So I'm going to say number, and then pass in a 3 or something like that, or 3, or any number that you want. So I just close this off this. And if I go ahead and check this function, it's starting to us 3, right? Good. So I can copy this and paste it a couple of times. I want to return a string. So this is going to be a string. So let me just convert that to be, let's say, string, return a string, and you can also return boolean. So boolean, and you can go ahead and ahead here and say true. So it all works. So it's for the same function, basically all that functionality works for the same, just for the same function, all that functionality works. So instead of having to write like almost the 20 lines of code that you wrote previously, doing the same thing just using one line. So let's say with the multi-dimensional array that we have our own custom type, and just go ahead and specify it here. So it's going to be an object. I'm going to say row 1 is going to be of type this, and I'm going to pass in 3, and then you're going to go ahead and say row 2 is going to be of type array, and then pass in 4 comma 5, right? That works perfectly. So let me see what we have here. Say type num is not assignable to this. Okay. So one I think I made an error here. I have to change this to be a number, right? A number. And then this one right here, I can also pass in a number. So good. So now that error should be gone. And if I run the code, now you can see we have it right here, right? So good. So that works perfectly fine, right? So that's how you can, or that's mainly the main concept of generics, right? And you probably came across generics when you're working with generic arrays. Okay, so let me just show you how you can use generics with arrays. So at the point when you're discussing about arrays, I mentioned that you can use there are two ways of creating arrays, either by using the square bracket notation or by using generics. So let me just show you how to do this in generics. So I'm going to say const. I'm going to call it const, and I'm going to call it my array, and it's going to be of type let's say multi let's say it's going to be of type array, just like this. And let's say this, and you pass in number, just like that. And you can go ahead and say equals to, and then finally pass in the values right here. So you can say for this and all that. So you can see basically we have the same arrays, right? Array data. So you can actually console log this if you want to see. So you say console dot log my array, so just like that. And if you go in, you can see now that array is being printed out right here. So good. So that's basically how we can have this just generic. So if you see this syntax in TypeScript, that is just generics, and you can see how we can define our own generic functions right here. So good. And some in TypeScript, my friend guys using the word common, sorry, the capital letter T for the type instead. So you can just go ahead and change it to be also capital letter T and also capital letter T. That works perfectly, right? So that works perfectly. So that's basically how you can have generics for your own different arrays. So if you want this, you can also change it to be strings. And then in here, you got providing all a string. So you can just, let me just select all this and just provide strings. So hello, and then world, like that. So if you go in here, you can see now it's now all strings. So good. That's basically how you can use generics for arrays in TypeScript. Okay. So now you understand how why you have to specify the data types right there because of this, right? So I hope that gives you a better sense of how generics work. Another thing you might want to do also do. Let me just get rid of this and let's go back in here. Let's say that you want to have the of array. Another way of working with arrays, you can just go in here and just say return the first index. So I don't know if you guys can understand this. Let me just go ahead and okay, an array of strings. So I have to make this one all array. So this is going to be an array. Going to be an array because you're expecting an array of this specific data type. So in this case, you're going to be expecting an array of numbers. That's why I have to pass in an array. In this case, you're going to be expecting an array of strings. So pass in a string right here. And then this, you're going to have an array of Boolean values and pass in that right here. And this, you're going to expecting an array of this specific type. So we're going to pass in an array as well. So good. So that's basically it. And if you go back in here, it all works. And this in this case, you're returning only the first element of that, which is going to be the return type T. So you're taking in an array of T types, and you're going to return T as a type because as a return type because you're only returning the first element. Okay. So if you want to return the whole thing, you can just say this and then go in here and that will also work and then return the whole array back, right? So that works perfectly. So that's basically how you can work with arrays, work with generics in TypeScript. So sometimes you might find people having different things in their generic stuff. So let me just go ahead. I can leave this right here, and I'm going to go ahead and specify two. You can have two different types. So this basically we have type 1 and type 2, and you're going to expect data 1, which is going to be of type T, and you're also going to say data 2 is going to be of type U. You're going to go ahead and return an object instead. So I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to return an object type, and I'm going to go in here and just pass in the object. So in here I'm going to say data, and then say data 2, just like that. So good. So once I have that, I can just go ahead and hit save on that. So now I have to go ahead and pass in. Let me just get rid of all this and let's just keep one of them. So I'm going to pass in 1 and 2. So I'm going to pass in another type, and the other type is just going to go ahead and say comma and then pass in. Let's say I want to say string, right? And I'm going to go in here and simply say it's going to be not going to be an array but just a type, and I'm going to say hello world, and just like that, and save that code. So once I have this saved, if I go back in here, you can see you're printing data 1 is 3 and data 2 is hello. So you can pass this is how you can work with generics because the first T is for number and the second T is for the string types. So basically that's how you can work with generics. Okay, so you can also have generic classes, and we'll look at that in the next video. We'll talk about generic classes and how to work with generic classes. But basically this is how generics are, and this is just an introduction to generics. In the next video we'll dive more into generics and by looking at classes and how you can use generic classes in TypeScript.